Alright guys, today we're going to talk about Kieran Conway and George Liddard and that whole card, but we're going to start off with the breaking news and probably what the headline of this video is. That is Alexander Usyk. Now he's made an official statement, here it is. No, I won't fight Italma, he's young, always teasing me. He said himself he doesn't hit grandpas. I'll fight until I'm 41, then I'll build a sports academy, I'll train there and train others. Now Usyk's 39 in January, so that gives him the best part of 2 years to compete. I'm surprised. I am surprised. I was thinking that he might have retired after Dubois. There's not too many names left that he can beat to really solidify his status as one of the greatest heavyweights of all time. I think he's already done that. But hey, if you can put a Joseph Parker and an Ajit Kabayel on that list, hell, go for it. He looked as good as he's ever done against Daniel Dubois. Like I said, I think his next opponent will be Joseph Parker. It is interesting to see his thoughts on Moses Italma. You think in 2 years' time, Moses Italma, on his trajectory and what they're saying about him, should be fighting for a world title. So if Usyk is still undisputed by the time he's 40, is Moses Italma not going to be in those conversations? Is Alexander Usyk going to vacate a belt instead of versing him? Is there a reason for that? Does he just simply not want to fight the young, hungry lion? I think there is something in there. But Alexander Usyk, he can do whatever he wants. I wouldn't be surprised if he retired before then, though. I think people want to know a plan, but necessarily the plan doesn't go the way you want. You know, he could wake up one day and say, you know what, I don't want to go 4 months without seeing my family anymore. I've had enough. I've heard boxers previously say they've woken up one morning, they've gone to train, and the motivation's gone, the edge is gone. They just don't have it anymore. They can feel it, and they say, "Yeah, it's over. I'm not gonna risk anything else because it's gone. I'm not putting everything into this camp. I've had enough." Other people, it takes them losing to say, "Yeah, I've had enough." Will Alexander Usyk get to that point? You never know. You never know. When boxers lose that edge, lose that what they had in them, that grit, that determination, the speed, whatever they have, they lose. And sometimes it's lost on an instant. Sometimes it's lost to a young, hungry lion like Moses Italma. We don't know when that's going to go for Usyk. Hopefully, I do hope he retires before he loses it. I think that always special in his record, and I think what he's done is special, and there's not much for him to gain anymore. But hell, he looked just as good as he's ever done against Daniel Dubois, so let him keep going if he's comfortable. Alright, the Diego Pacheco versus Sergio card that is on the 13th of December has had a few fights added to it. Joe Cordina will take on Gabriel Flores Jr. for the WBO International Lightweight belt, and Sky Nicholson will take on Julian Luna for the WBC Interim Super Bantamweight title. Obviously, that's a big, big belt to have. I think Sky Nicholson, if she wins this fight, when she wins this fight, she'll be next in line for Ellie Scottney next year. And that's good for Sky Nicholson. She started the year losing her WBC featherweight title to Tiara Brown. This will be her third fight after that. So 4 fights in 2025. Love an active fighter. All of a sudden, she's put herself in contention for an undisputed bout. So big props to Sky Nicholson. Can't wait for that fight. Was hoping she was going to be fighting in Australia, but isn't. Best of luck to her. Alright, let's talk about this Conway versus Liddard card. Good card. We'll just talk about the 4 main events. Let's start off with Shannon Ryan versus Chloe Watson. I know it was the co-main, but if you saw the fight, you'll know, and we're going to talk about it. The fight only goes 4 rounds before going to a technical unanimous decision. In the 3rd round, Chloe Watson and Shannon Ryan collide heads. Chloe Watson's eye swells up till she can't see. That was in the 3rd round. They let her go 1 more. After the 4th, they say, "You've had enough. We're going to a technical decision." Before we get to what happens in the decision, in terms of the fight, Shannon Ryan was well and truly all over Chloe Watson for the first 3 rounds. Her speed and her movement was just too good. Chloe Watson couldn't get near her, couldn't land a punch. I thought Shannon Ryan landed some good punches in the 2nd. There was a really nice uppercut that she landed. If anything, Chloe Watson's best round was the 4th round, where she could only see with one eye, and the other eye was swollen. So that was a bit confusing. They let her do the fourth. To be honest, the reason they stopped it after the fourth is the reason they should have stopped it after the third. Now, I'm not sure if they had stopped it after the third, whether they would have gone to the cards or not, because you've got to have a certain amount of rounds in you. They probably should have stopped it after the third. If they weren't going to stop it after the third, it didn't make much sense stopping it after the fourth. But either way, they come to that decision. Shannon Ryan wins the decision. It was 40-36 on all the cards, and Shannon Ryan becomes IBF Intercontinental Super Flyweight Champion. Look, she looked really good, Shannon Ryan, but she would have liked the more rounds in her in getting the win properly. She's probably not far off a title fight at Super Flyweight, Shannon Ryan. She couldn't be very far off now. She's, 3 or 4 wins in a row now since losing? So yeah, I think with that IBF Intercontinental Super Flyweight belt, it's not a depth-filled division. She's probably teetering on the edge of being next. All right, let's talk Jimmy Sains versus Troy Coleman. Jimmy Sains, just too big, too physical, and too powerful for Troy Coleman. In the third round, Coleman's eyes cut, his nose is bleeding, he's looking just out of sorts. In every aspect, Jimmy Sains was all over him. Coleman then gets sent back in for the fourth round. He holds on for dear life to survive the fourth round, but then they retire him in the corner. Right decision. He was getting destroyed. Jimmy Sains was manhandling him. Sains goes now to 11 wins, 10 knockouts, and becomes British Boxing English Middleweight Champion and Commonwealth Silver. Obviously, the full British and the full Commonwealth belts are fought for in the main card between Conway and Liddard, so we'll get to what happened with those belts. But Jimmy Sains, he's just destroyed Troy Coleman. Alright, this is a very, very, very exciting fighter, TMA Ayton, and she took on Laura Valdebenito in a 6-round contest at bantamweight. From the get-go, the first thing that I noticed was TMA Ayton looks huge, She massive compared to Valdebenito, which is always a good thing. You always want to be big in your weight, as long as she's not sort of killing herself to make that weight, which she didn't look like. She looked very healthy on fight night. Yeah, she was just all over it. Valdebenito spent most of the fight in a corner or running away. Tia Ayton, I'll start with my criticism first, because then we're really going to hype her up at the end. My one criticism was, we know she has that power and that ability, but sometimes you just got to be a bit more patient. She seemed to have been searching for the knockout a little bit too much, swinging for it rather than making it come naturally, which is only a bad thing when you come up against higher level opposition. When you start swinging those punches, you can get countered very easily. Valdebenito was offering nothing, so it didn't really matter, but that would be my one criticism. Look, this is her third fight, man. This is her third fight. It's hard to give much criticism, but if there was, that's it. In terms of what she did well, I mean, she drops her once in the second round with a clean right hand, and then, doesn't get as much success in the third, but in the fourth starts off very well, lands some good uppercuts, did a good 4 or 5 piece combination, and then towards the second half of that round, she lands a clean right hand to the back of Valdebenito's head. Not a legal punch, but it wasn't as though Ayton was aiming for the back of her head. It was more of a Ayton through that right hand that she was throwing all night. Valdebenito turns to get out of the way and it lands behind the ear. That's the second knockdown for Valdebenito. She hits the canvas, gets back up, and I thought there wasn't much in it. It could have even been more of a push to the ground rather than really hurting her. She gets up at 5 or 6. The referee looks at her, and at 8 or 9, he calls the fight off. I couldn't believe it. I thought, that fight wasn't over. I'm not going to pretend for a second that Valdebenito was going to come out and do something magical. Ayton would have destroyed her regardless. She was well and truly on top of her. Whether she got the stoppage that round or the next round, I'm not sure, but I thought Ayton deserved the opportunity to get a nicer highlight reels type stoppage. Either way, you look at it on paper, drops her twice, moves to 3 wins, 3 knockouts, and at 19 years of age, she's probably the hottest prospect in women's boxing, 5-time national champion, and like I said, at 19, 3 wins, 3 knockouts. There's one thing that's good for a woman is have the power to knock people out, because in women's boxing there's not too many that you look at and say, wow, this person's had 12 or 13 fights and they've had 10 or 11 knockouts. So if she can keep this up and keep stopping her opponents, it'll be good. The one thing I will say is, I know she's only had 3 fights since she's 19, but I would start putting her in harder fights. I would start looking and saying, who's in the top 15 that we can put her in against? Who's in the top 10? Doesn't have to necessarily be in bantamweight. Look in super bantamweight. Look in, if she can make it, super flyweight. See who's around that can test your level, because as much as it is nice to get 4 or 5 wins, easy wins, knockouts, it is also good to put her in against tough opponents, because I think this is a chick that we're going to look at and say, she's not far off. I've seen women fighters get opportunities for world titles at 9 wins. So you want to make sure she's prepared, because if that opportunity comes, you don't want her last fight to be someone of the caliber of Valda Benito. No offense to her, but Tia Ayton is just on another level. She's exciting. She's a big hitter, and I think she's got all the attributes that she needs to become a very successful world champion. The other thing that she's got going for her is she's got Katie Taylor as a mentor. I mean, could you ask for a better mentor than that? All right, let's talk about the main event. Great performance by George Liddard. Kieran Conway coming into this fight, 5 wins, holding the belt, experienced fighter, never been stopped. It was a big ask for George Liddard, there's no doubt. Kieran Conway was coming in with the experience, the know-how that George Liddard at 23 hasn't quite got there yet. But in terms of the fight, it was completely the other way around. George Liddard looked like the more experienced, more know-how fighter. He was creating great angles and picking Conway off at will. Conway looked reserved. He sort of held this high guard and looked awful whenever he did. It wasn't until they started trading or Conway really let his hands fly that he looked at all in the fight. But George Liddard was all over him. In the 9th round, now coming into the 9th round, Conway couldn't really hold his left arm up and his left hand. I'm not sure what injury was sustained at what point, but he wasn't throwing and he wasn't able to hold the hand up. And the first knockdown in the 9th round, George Liddard gets 2 punches clearly through, and more than looking wobbled, Kieran Conway looked to be grabbing at his arm, sort of falls over, hits the canvas eventually, and you're thinking, he didn't look hurt, but he didn't look wobbled, but he looked hurt, as in physically rather than what's going up in the brain. Gets back up, survives the round, and you're thinking, this guy doesn't look right. Comes out to the 10th, can barely hold his hand up. George Liddard obviously knows, goes straight for the head, and the fight's over. The Conway corner throw in the towel. The guy couldn't defend himself. Probably shouldn't have come out for that 10th round, but a good win for George Liddard. Becomes British and Commonwealth middleweight champion. And the question is, who next? 23 years of age, 13 wins, got those 2 belts. It's time to start making some moves. Now, the 2 names that I've thought about, I probably would like to see him in another British level fight. So who are the 2 best British middleweight fighters that you can probably pick from? There's a few. My 2 picks were probably Liam Smith. He's a good, experienced, know-how fighter. I know he's coming off 2 losses to Eubank Jr. and Aaron McKenna. But I think the experience that he has and the know-how and the fight that I think he'll give George Liddard will be nothing but good for Liddard. The other person was Denzel Bentley. He's been around the block for a while. 25 odd fights. Has been British middleweight champion. It's European WBO international middleweight champion. Experienced, been in world title fights, namely that decision loss against Yanibek Alimkhanali. Look, anyone that can go 12 rounds with Yanibek, who I think is the best middleweight in the world, you know, you're going to give somebody a fight. So I think Denzel Bentley or Liam Smith would be a good matchup for George Liddard. Alright guys, that is everything for today. Leave your thoughts in the comments below, what you thought of the fights, what you think of Usyk and the Pacheco card. I've got some big videos coming out this week, namely the Joseph Parker versus Fabio Wardley breakdown. Good video there. Definitely check that out in fight week. Like, subscribe to the channel, and I'm out of here. See yous!